Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I am incredibly excited to get this show on the road. It's 5 minutes past the hour, and I don't want to take up too much more time here. So with that, everyone, I'd love to get this alumni episode started. So once again, my name is Nupur Arya, and on behalf of the HBS Club of India and the HBS India Research Center, we are so grateful that you chose to spend this next hour with us. I'm incredibly excited about introducing our speaker here today, Sanjiv Bajaj, HBS class of 1997, Chairman and MD of Bajaj Finserv. The Bajaj family name needs no introduction, of course. It has made an indelible mark on not only India's economy, but its politics and its history. And carrying that rich legacy forward is Sanjiv Bajaj, who, as many of you know, has built a diversified, tech-first, customer-centric, talent-driven, professionally run lending business that offers products and services to over 50 million customers, 10% of which I understand are in rural India. I had the unique privilege of partnering with Professor Das on teaching the Finserv case study for its very first time, published just a few months ago, to a cohort of senior executives. The eagerness and excitement with which they participated, and let me tell you, this was otherwise a very cynical bunch of senior executives, was, I think, a reflection of the case's deep and diverse applications. An otherwise jaded bunch of salt and pepper haired executives left the class inspired to think differently, not only about the way that they conduct business, but interestingly enough, about the way that they conduct themselves as leaders. And we're so grateful that Sanjiv agreed to share the many facets of that journey here with us. He is in many ways living out the mission of the school and is building and leading an organization that is taking out the time to engage with our alumni community.
Thank you, Nupur.
And with that, I am also incredibly excited to introduce our moderator today, Manish Kejriwal, MBA class of 1995, who's had an incredibly impressive journey of his own. Having spent nearly 13 years at McKinsey, where he left as partner, Manish went on to lead Temasek international operations outside of Singapore. He founded the firm's activities in India, where over $4 billion were deployed under his leadership. He also led the business in Africa and the Middle East and initiated investments in Russia. He also served on Temasek's Global Investment Management Committee. But it was in 2011 that Manish took the entrepreneurial plunge of starting up Kedaara Capital, a private equity fund that he co-founded with his partners. He's had, as a result, a unique lens into the investment trends around the world across sectors in both private and public companies, and brings all that experience and expertise here today in his current role as co-CEO and managing partner at Kedaara, but also as a strong supporter of the club's activities. When Sanjiv agreed, we knew there was no other person that could bring his story to life as Manish could, and we're so grateful for him to make the time for Alumni on Air once again. Thank you, Manish, for being a part of this episode, and over to you on taking the discussion forward.
Thank you, Nupur. And, this was, as Nupur said, it was an exciting opportunity to take on Sanjiv. But then I realized as soon as I went through this extended resume, which was sent to me, that's a very different Sanjiv that I knew 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And so all the jokes and all the side conversations I was going to put into this, I have to be a lot more careful about, given the profile that Sanjiv has built up. But Sanjiv, on the very basis and essence, is one of not only one of the sharpest guys that you'll see, but also, as you will see in his questions, one that is embedded in deep humility. And I think on the basis of that, let me just start off with the first question. The unique thing about Sanjiv is, despite the companies he runs, the market cap he commands, if you come across him at a restaurant or anywhere else, you'll see the most down-to-earth guy. So, Sanjiv, why don't you just tell us, why are you the way you are? Tell us a bit about your life in the early years, growing up in Akurdi, and what was you're very much a Punekar and not a Mumbaikar. So just give a bit of your background so we all have a context of what sort of shaped you in your early years.
So Manish, that's a tough one for me to say why I am the way I am. I guess that's what you have to ask people around me, including somebody like yourselves. I must say, I also much preferred, if you can, the last 10 years and ask all those fun questions so that the next 1 hour can be not only interesting, but fun for everybody who's taken the time out today. But yes, I think a little bit about the background growing up could and should help to explain the person that I am today. All three of us, Rajiv, my sister Sunaina, and for most of you to know, she's the one Manish is married to, but that's not the reason why he's here. We all grew up not only in Pune, but we grew up at the Bajaj Auto campus outside of Pune, in a small town of the village of Akurdi. Grew up in the factory colony. The interesting thing is that our senior executives all stayed in the city because they wanted their children to go to the so-called good schools over there, and there were many good schools there. My parents were very clear. They had identified a newly set up school which was 5 minutes away from home, set up by a convent, a Swiss convent actually. And it was a school meant for the kids from the nearby localities. So whether it was Bajaj Auto, whether it was Thermax, it was Bajaj Tempo in those days, it was Tata Motors, SKF. It was typically students from middle and low middle class families that stayed over there in and around the factories. And we went to school. We went to the same school there. What was great about that school was nobody cared who you were. Most of those kids we grew up with probably didn't even know till we got into our teens that somebody came from XYZ family. And we grew up with a level of simplicity, with a high level of discipline in this convent school, and doing all the fun things that kids did. So discipline in school, you played sports in the evening. Remember at that time, there were no mobile phones, no iPads. So you played basketball, you played football, you went on your bicycle for a ride and played all kinds of games. But more than anything else, it was what I would say is a wholesome life. We went in the same school bus as everybody else to school. And there are lessons that came from there. For example, I remember all three of us used to go to school together in the morning. And one day, one of us got ready a little late. We used to have this ambassador car, green ambassador car. And my mother said, okay, the driver will go and drop you because the bus is late. Sure enough, the next day, the other kid was late. And mother said, okay, the car is there. Car will go and drop you. And we said, this is something interesting that we've struck upon. So third day, again, we got a little late. But unknown to us, my father was keeping tabs. And obviously, my mother had told him that this is what had happened. So the third day when we were late, my father was standing out there. And, so we said, okay, we are late. We need to take the car. And he said, no, you will walk to school. So three of us, of course, he was kind enough to have one security guy with us. We walked the half an hour to school. And what we were most scared about was not walking, but reaching school late, because that school was very strict. And we never forgot that. So we made sure for the rest of our lives, because I think I must have been 9 or 10 at that time. For the rest of our school lives, we were ready in time. Simple messages like this, I think, helped in create a very strong foundation. And I found that to play such an important role in my life, because as I grew, I went to college, I went to HBS, I went to the UK for my master's in engineering. Before that, you met all kinds of people. You met people across various sections of society. It is much easier in life to move up in talking to people than it is to move down. And that's why, as we went to school over there, as Bajaj Auto grew, we helped the convent set up a second school called the Bajaj School, which the convent continues to run. And both my children went to the same school. They graduated, they finished their 12th grade from the same school, because we felt that foundational experience was very important in our lives, and we know it will be important in theirs. So maybe that explains a little bit, Manish.
Sanjiv, that was very descriptive. Let me just pick on that, and if I can, and we'll get back to your point about the focus will be on the Bajaj Finance story as you requested. That's what a lot of people are interested in. But just before we get there, you move from the simple kid going by bus, green ambassador, or walking to school to a guy who's now the chairman and MD of a 400,000. Well, I won't even attempt to say what your market cap is, because it's probably gone up by another 10% since the last time we spoke. You're also a president of the CII. You are been a Davos attendee for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years. So explain, you were a simple kid going to a small school in the outskirts of Pune, where even all your friends in Pune were in the city. Now you're this larger than life character. What has made you remain the way you are? What I'm getting at here, Sanjiv, is you gave one example of your dad, and I know fathers, especially fathers like yours, can not only be overbearing, but it's tough to continue a legacy. And many people go into a bit of a shell in the presence of your father. Can you, before we jump into the Bajaj Finance story, say a bit about the influence dad had on your life, on your beliefs, and how you conduct yourself?
See, my parents never pressurized us to join group businesses or otherwise. On the contrary, they were always very clear. And my father said that when we were growing up, he said, do whatever you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be business. It could be anything else. But once you know what you're doing and you're passionate about that, give it your best. So it was always about finding whatever was your own calling and then doing well. And whether it is, for example, in school days, it was about studying hard, trying to do well in school, and touch wood, I did well in school. It was about whether it was sport. I played basketball at the university national level, representing Pune University. It was about giving the best over there, but it was about doing stuff I wanted to do. And the same was true for all of us. And I think that passion is what then drove us to do well. And I guess part of it was the atmosphere at home, though a lot of it implicit, but we saw my father working hard. We saw him trying to do his best. We saw, as we grew older, we saw him and the pressures he faced, but how he stood firm for what he believed in. And I think some of that helped us build elements of our own character. Individually as a person, I've always been one that enjoys listening to others. And most of the time, my wife may say differently, but and she's here somewhere listening, but most of the time, I listen to the other point of view before I give my own. And that's, again, just a character of mine over the years. So I believe you learn a lot and you frame your point of view a lot better when you hear from others, when you don't have to be the first one in the room to speak. But that's, again, me. That doesn't mean that that's the only way to be. There are many others who do equally well, but who are the first who want to speak.
Thanks, Sanjiv. Why don't I, before the last couple of quick things on you personally, obviously the Finserv and finance story is also about you, but very specifically on you, just talk about how you made the decision to go to HBS. What made you apply there? I know obviously your dad was there, some of your uncles were there. What made you go to HBS? And again, for, obviously most people on these calls on the call are strong believers, but what were your 2 or 3 main takeaways, and what would you advise your own children and nieces and nephews about the choice of getting an MBA or not, and should it be from a place like Harvard or not?
So growing up at some implicit level on the dining table after a particular age, the conversations went to business. And I guess somewhere at the back of my mind, getting into some kind of business was almost obvious and was interesting. I knew I did not want to become a pilot, and I knew I did not want to become a musician. I knew that business is what attracted me. My engineering degrees were very focused, but by definition, at the end of it, I felt the need for broader exposure on the business side. I had no education on the finance side, on people development, on marketing, and an MBA seemed to be the obvious choice. I, of course, applied to a bunch of schools, but HBS was the #1 option because of the family legacy, with so many of you having been there. I think maybe I had not met Manish when I applied, otherwise I may have changed my mind, because he had just graduated from HBS. Just joking there. So HBS clearly was top of mind. I was fortunate enough to get into HBS. And one of the things that attracted me to HBS compared to some of the other schools was the case study method of learning. And we did 3 cases a day in my first term, 5 days a week. But to me, before I got into HBS, the opportunity to go through 500-600 cases, which means 500-600 real life situations over those 2 years, was fascinating. It was something that I had never been exposed to. And the last important reason is Shefali and I had just got married a few months before that. We come from a joint family. We knew we would continue to stay with the joint family after coming back. So that 2 year that we got by ourselves away from the family in the US was also a big attraction at that time. But coming to the second part, coming to the second part, you know, what I took away from my 2 years at HBS, one, coming back to the case study really made me learn how to think. You think deep, you think broad, and you think fast. Because with 3 cases a day, you have no choice but to do that. Second, because half your marks is on class participation, you learn how to participate. You learn how to present your point of view with confidence. You learn how to defend your point of view, as so many of you have done. And you know how to address somebody else's point of view. So to me, just the conditioning of the mind was something which was a big, I would say, takeaway for me through the HBS experience. In addition, the friends I made, a whole bunch of great friends, many of whom I'm still in touch with. The faculty, top world-class faculty that brings in tremendous experience, as we know, not only from the classroom, but from what they've done or they do outside as well. So the practicality of that, I think it's a combination of these factors where I would definitely recommend the MBA to anyone who's going to get into a broader work role versus a very narrow role. And that's something that, for example, my daughter Sanjali is 24 and she's working right now in one of our companies. And my advice to her is the same, that if she wants to broaden out her career options, her overall exposure, then a good MBA is the way to go.
Thanks, Sanjiv. But obviously, Srikanth will be proud of your answers, and he will be looking to you for increased contributions, both intellectually and monetarily. So I'll plug that in for HBS. Let me then move on to the more professional side of your life. And I don't know how many people in this group know that before you embarked on the journey of turning around, growing, and really creating what is truly, and I mean this absolutely sincerely, having seen most non-banking finance companies in the country, probably the most advanced AI, probably the best financial services company in the country for many reasons. Your roots, you actually started off when you came back from HBS for many years, not with the finance company, but actually with Bajaj Auto. So do you want to just describe what did you do? How did you choose, or what were you given as your responsibilities in your early years when you came back from HBS? Any learnings from HBS which you applied to Bajaj Auto, and any learnings from your years at Bajaj Auto that you took away and was useful for you as you launched and grew? Actually, I don't say you launched, but you grew what was a very small captive finance company into something to what it is today. And, I'm going to ask you to describe that later. But for right now, just say a bit about your early years of getting back to India. How did it feel? How, what did you do at Bajaj Auto and the learnings from there?
So I came back from HBS in 97 and worked for 10 years in Bajaj Auto, initially in the finance and costing area, and then took over the opportunity to build exports for Bajaj Auto. The costing area was an interesting one because, we had a team, very sincere, smart, but they held all the costs very close to their chests. They didn't want those numbers leaking out, even though it may have been the cost of making a particular crankshaft or making a particular gear, which in the overall scheme of things had no relevance if that information was known to a wider group of people. And partly from what I learned at HBS in one of my courses, I think it was a balanced scorecard, what we decided to do was to take power into the hands that had the control. So we said, if you're talking of costs, the person that is responsible for consuming or saving on cost is the workforce on the shop floor. So why don't we create a set of metrics and charts for them where all our major costs that they can control on the shop floor. So we're not talking of capex cost of buying a new machine, but we're talking of consumables. We're talking of cost of quality, that's rejection and rework. We're talking of electricity. So toolings. Why not start tracking those? So by then, Bajaj Auto and Rajiv had already moved the company from mass manufacturing towards lean manufacturing and the Japanese cellular management process. So our manufacturing was all based on these small cells. And we went cell by cell. We created a team that went and put the basic costs down and started tracking each individual cost on a shift by shift basis, so that over a few months, we had graphs clearly telling us where we should be, what was the standard costing that was built into the product profit or the component profit versus where we were. And it was eye-opening for the people on the shop floor, whether it was the cell manager, whether it was the workforce there, because nobody had ever talked to them and engaged them in this kind of manner. And we, over a period of time, built a culture where we started identifying, controlling waste on the shop floor. So that was one direct, I would say, application of what I had learned from my HBS days. Did that for a few years and frankly started getting a little bored of being just on the sidelines. And that's why in discussion then with the senior management of the company, I decided to take a stab at exports. Our exports were, this was 2004 that I got into exports, and exports were just under 100,000 vehicles a year in a few markets from Latin America to Southeast Asia. And basically, I think between 2004 and 7, I was probably doing 2 to 3 trips a month. I was out 15 days, 20 days of the month. But rebuilding relationships, identifying markets, that products that we made were relevant. Because keep in mind, we made good quality motorcycles, 3-wheelers at a competitive price. But in the market, we were neither the Japanese that were perceived at much higher quality, but were a lot more expensive, nor were we the Chinese that had the perception of poor quality, but were significantly cheaper than us. So this middle position was an awkward position. Somebody who only had $300 to buy a motorcycle bought the Chinese. The person who had 1,000 bought the Japanese. But they couldn't figure out what was this animal at $500-600. So getting the right product positioning, getting the distribution right, building the right partnerships with our partners in different countries, and then creating the right service support. So we created offices in each of the major blocks of countries that we existed, telling our teams, you are responsible to the customer there. You have to make sure what he wants, as long as it is legit, you will interface with the factory to deliver that to him. Doing relevant customizations in different markets while retaining the core characteristics of the product. That was again important. For example, McDonald's in India. McDonald's still sells burgers in India, but given the large vegetarian population, if they had not introduced the aloo tikki burger, they probably would not have had the revenues that they did, but you also do then everything else. So the right kind of customizations in each market, building this up, we built out our exports. And I remember, so at that time we were doing about 8,000 vehicles a month, 2 and 3 wheelers when I started running exports. A year down the line, we were at about 12,000 vehicles a month. And my father and I, after dinner, very often used to just walk in the patio, and we were strolling. And very gently, he told me, he said, you know, Sanjiv, it's been a year. Sales have only gone up from 8,000 to 12,000 a month. And, you know, I talked to senior people in the company, and they tell me that till Sanjiv was in finance, it was okay because he was in the background. Here now, success or failure is going to be attributed to him. So, you know, they're saying at least 15,000 we should get to. Otherwise, this will be seen as failure. And I told him, thank you, Father. I appreciate what you're telling me. We will get there and more, but I'm building the foundation of what we need, and give me some time to do that. 3 months later, he repeated the same thing. I could see the concern in his voice. We ended that year selling about 200,000 vehicles. We ended the next year at 440,000 vehicles. We ended the year after that, when I left, at over 600,000 vehicles. So by then, I think I'd proved myself, to him at least. But the important thing was that Bajaj Auto, which for a long time had languished at 100,000 vehicles a year, Bajaj Auto was selling in the export markets for decades with the right focus, the right products, and the right market positioning, and then building the right partnerships with your partners over there. We built the right foundation for the future, and the team that took over after that has done even more brilliantly. Today, 50% of Bajaj Auto sales, almost 2 million vehicles a year, are in the export markets. They are leaders. They are number 1, 2 in over 40 countries around the world. And to me, it was a job as a line manager, which was exceedingly exciting. I was also fortunate, coming from the founder family, that within a broad set of boundary conditions that the board and the senior management set for me, I had the freedom to go and build out exports the way I thought was relevant and appropriate for the company. Some of these things have stayed with me when then in 2007, I moved to financial services, and happy to talk about that.
Sanjiv, listen, I think what you just laid out, after spending 10 years at what was, you know, the Pulsar had been launched, you were driving exports, lots of visibility. What is going to question your judgment when you decided to leave all that success and join a fledgling, almost non-existing finance company? And just to set the context, I'm looking at a case that I was reading on the plane yesterday, which was Bajaj Finance building an omnipresent financial services firm. I think it was written only in August by our own Narayan Das, as well as, and I think Rachna Tehliani from Bombay, Anjali's office probably helped write it. And if I'm looking at Exhibit 1, and I used to always look at exhibits before the text, you know, at that time, it says the company was formed in 1987. So this was the year 20 of the company, but the profit after tax was a stupendous 21 crores. Just to put it in context, the profit last year for everyone in the same case shows it as 4,420 crores. So you grew from 0 to 21 crores in 20 years. We're going to talk about the current and the future later. Why would you leave Bajaj Auto? Established, it had come back after the scooter wars, motorcycles were back, Kawasaki was a part, but more importantly, Pulsar was launched. You were driving the exports, to go to something which was, almost, I guess at that time it was only a captive finance company selling 3 and 2 wheelers, financing the 2 and 3 wheelers. So I got to question your HBS education and question your judgment on most people take the path closer to the sun. You chose the opposite. Give us your thinking and your drive and what made you do that.
So, there were 3 key drivers. One was 2000, from 2004 or 5 is when we had these insurance companies we set up in 2001. They were also owned by Bajaj Auto. That was the main company in the group. And they were 3 or 4 years old. As you said, the finance company was a captive finance company for Bajaj products, very small. But India had started growing at 8.5%, 9%. And financial services seem to have tremendous promise. And that's where a number of institutional investors started telling us in Bajaj Auto that, over a period of time, financial services is going to grow. It requires its own focus. And, as investors, we may not have the appetite for auto and financial services in the same firm. And my father used to say that, yes, demerger is important, but not an urgent decision. And I think a few people, including Manish over here, played an important role in telling him by 2006-07 that what are you waiting for now? This is an opportunity that we must grasp. So there was an opportunity that clearly came up. That was reason number one. Second reason was I had spent 10 years in Bajaj Auto. My older brother Rajiv was doing a great job in building the company, and he was running the company as CEO. So to me, after building exports, and I could have continued to build that, I saw this entrepreneurial opportunity in the financial services business. And to me, very honestly, I did not really spend too much time thinking through the risks and whether it was safer to be in Bajaj Auto or not. I was excited by the opportunity. I was 37, so neither was I too young, nor was I too old. And I was confident that as India was growing, that with some amount of luck, and my uncle Nanu Pamdani, who had just retired after a full career at Citibank, had committed to help me build the financial services business. Because keep in mind, to you, and maybe that's where the issue of judgment comes, I was an engineer with an MBA, having worked 10 years in an auto business. I knew nothing about financial services. And we'll come to that. But the good thing is, I knew that I knew nothing about financial services, which is important to know at times. The third big driver was whether it was my father, whether it was my wife Shifali, or my uncle Madhur who's participating, his wife Kumud, my aunt Kumud, they all told me that, Sanjiv, we think you can make this jump. We know you'll have challenges, but we are behind you. Go ahead and do it. So there was tremendous motivation and support to go and take that leap of faith. And maybe there was a little bit of craziness that got me to do it as well.
Thanks, Sanjiv. Brave decision. And I can say, like most things, if you look back at it in retrospect, it was a no-brainer. But what I just wanted to make sure that the audience understood was at that time, like we do in a case study, if we put this as a class at HBS today and had the situation in 2008, and we voted and said how many would remain in Bajaj Auto, how many would have joined Bajaj Finance, I think the number would have joined Bajaj Finance would have been less than 10%. But thank you for doing that. Thank you for increasing selfishly everyone's wealth in the family. So for that, we give you kudos. But I think the drive to getting to where you are is the basis of this discussion today, right? And it's very difficult for me to bring out the richness of the story, despite having experienced a lot of this secondhand through your eyes. But why don't we start off and say, at what point did you think this whole, just to explain, and why don't you explain it? Initially, it was Bajaj Auto and Bajaj Finance. When did this need for Bajaj Finserv, which is the holding company for Bajaj Finance, really happen? What really was the inspiration? What were the key business proposition? What were the challenges at that time when you were looking at this along with Nanu at starting off something? But even at that time, despite it having a 21 crore net profit number, what were your aspirations? And I would think, at least from a valuation perspective, I don't think any one of us, maybe you could have imagined where we would land up. But at that time, what were your hopes, your aspirations and your inspirations? And what was the basic business proposition? Why, there were companies like SRF Finance, Siat Finance, many other financial services companies. This was right before the financial crisis, just to give it a context, what was your thinking when you launched it? And I'm saying stick to that question for now, because we'll come back to what it is now.
Okay, but again, multiple questions in there. So if my answer gets long, just feel free to stop me there. I recently, one of my colleagues who's been with me through this journey, pulled out a presentation that in 2007 we had made to the Bajaj Auto board on, through the demerger, Finserv became the holding company as a result of the demerger, what we would do. And we had decided that Bajaj was a household brand. It had high credibility. It was a consumer brand. So our major focus would be with the retail consumer and small business that mimics the retail consumer and how they behave. The second was that because the brand was trusted, we also had the responsibility to maintain the credibility of the brand. Hence, we would be very transparent in our dealings. Third was that we said that, if you look at the common man, and as India is growing, in his financial services life cycle, starts off early, needs a loan for his two-wheeler or his car, then for his home. So he has a set of loan requirements. As he starts buying a set of assets, he needs to protect those assets, and he has requirements for insurance, car insurance, home insurance, health insurance. And then as he starts collecting money, he needs to start investing that. So there's an investment opportunity that comes up, whether it's through a mutual fund or through life insurance policies, which give you both long-term protection as well as appreciation in investment. So we said these are the three building blocks we want to be in: investments, protection, and investment management. Our focus is the middle class customer, and who will then have a wallet size large enough where we can cross-sell in these products over a period of time. We will go with the basic attributes of high transparency, simple, intuitive products, build excellence in otherwise an industry that is heavily commoditized. Because, there were giants in that space, whether banks or NBFCs. So we knew that we could never play the price game and succeed. So we had to play the differentiation game. And that's where some of the learnings from my days at Bajaj Auto also came. So we decided to focus on four, I would say, larger parameters in how we build our businesses, and they still drive us today. The first is to build long-term, profitable, high-growth businesses. And each of these words are very important. Very often, when we are taking a business decision, we come across short-term opportunities, but sometimes they can take you away from where you want to go long-term. But they could help you with your short-term incentive or bonus or market share. We were very clear we would sacrifice that short-term if it did not align with where we wanted to be in the long term. And we would balance growth and profit, which any business leader needs to do in any business. So that was our first parameter. Second, as I mentioned, in a commoditized industry, we wanted to focus on greater customer stickiness through disruptive innovation. And if you have time, I'll come to an example or two on that. Third, from my Bajaj Auto days, where we ran very lean operations, we decided that if we were going to be in the market with large volume loans to retail consumers, we must run this as a top quality shop, because every rupee that we save either goes to the customer, to the employee, or to the shareholder. And hence, no saving. And even now we save in rupees in some of our operation processes that we end up taking for improvement every year. So lean operations was very important. And fourth was accountable empowerment. As I mentioned to you earlier, what I enjoyed in exports at Bajaj Auto was within a set of broad guidelines to build businesses as an entrepreneur. And to us, what was important was if we were going to hire highly capable people, align them on strategy, align them on the basic broad objectives, but then empower them, provide them with all the tools so that they act and behave as owners, and reward them accordingly as well with longer term incentives, ESOPs, but more than that, create an environment where they feel it is their own business. And that is what has helped us build this kind of culture. As we started moving ahead, and I remember the two insurance companies were already growing, but 2007, Bajaj Finance, we hired Rajiv Jain, I think probably clearly India's best financial services CEO and probably one of the top CEOs in the country across sectors for a wide variety of reasons. But Rajiv came on board, our senior team came on board. 99% of them are still there with us today. And as we sat down to then further break down the strategy, what we said is that, okay, we're going to focus on the middle class consumer because he's the one who trusts the Bajaj brand. And he's the one who's experienced the Bajaj brand, whether through our toasters, microwaves, motorcycles, etc. But when we go and focus on the middle class customer, what's also important is to get the wallet size right so that we can cross-sell multiple products. As Rajiv Jain says, once I acquire a customer and I pay to acquire that customer, it would be stupid for me to pay a second time to sell him another product. So I get the customer in and ensure then that I can meet his or her financial needs through their life cycle as long as they fit into our appropriate credit metrics. The next was focusing on building excellence through differentiation in the business and then scaling up businesses. We knew that in terms of the way we looked at business lines, neither did we want to be a Ford, which is very commoditized with no offense to Ford, nor did we want to be as niche as a Ferrari. We wanted to be the Mercedes-Benz, the BMW, the Audi in our positioning. So you build the wow around that, but you have enough volume. And we were clear in the retail business, and India had already started growing on the retail side significantly by 08-09, that if we had to be in a position to scale up, we had to get onto the cloud. And we started looking for cloud service providers so that incremental scale and cost came at a lower cost than what a fixed investment would come in. That's where the entire focus on becoming more and more digital came about. And finally, even today, we say that we are a risk-first company. But risk very often gets very narrowly defined in the risk teams telling you what you can't do. We started running projects with 5,000, 10,000 customer data points where we tried out different risk parameters which others would not give clearance to give a loan in geographies. We ran them as different projects, and learnings from that helped us on a continuous basis to improve our risk parameters in giving loans. Over a period of time, all this has gone into algos, and algos do it for us. But the whole idea of risk was that say no when it's required, but your job is to find out the correct ways to say yes. And then the entire reward and incentivization program, especially as you move to middle management and above, is a shared one. So the risk guy, while 70%, 80% of his bonus will come through the risk parameters, but 20% will come on sales as well. So there is a shared responsibility. And it's a combination of these factors which helped us build out the business. I remember when we got Rajiv on board, Rajiv Jain, market cap in Bajaj Finance was about 250, 300 crore or so. And a few months down the line, both of us were sitting having a drink and saying that, you know, it'll be great if in the next 5 years, we can get to a 5,000 crore market cap. And I think 3 years later, we were close to 5,000 crores. And we said, wow, another 5 years, if 10,000 crores we get to, we have made it, you know, then we've achieved what we wanted to in life. Well, once we got to 10,000 crores, we stopped looking at market cap and we just focused on building the business. We've been fortunate over the years to win a few awards, and we take
we can change here.
We celebrate these awards. The next day.
All right, can I request everyone to be on? I thought we'd muted everyone, Nupur. Is there anyone who's on mute?
Requesting anyone who's just unmuted the line to please go ahead and do that. And Khushbu, if you could just manage that manually otherwise. Thank you. Yes. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
Thank you. So when we get some of these awards once in a while, we go out and celebrate with the entire team. The next day, the award is forgotten. And as Bezos says, we are back to day one. So the team is simple. The team is focused in building their businesses. The teams also have the responsibility to say no to their business because they have full P&L responsibility. For example, we run 37 business lines under Rajiv Jain. Each one is run by a team that has full P&L responsibility. That's where ownership comes in, accountability comes in, empowerment comes in, reward comes in.
So Sanjiv, let me be very, I'm not going to just given how interesting this is, we might run over a few minutes. Nupur, you tell us if it's getting out of hand, but I think we're just getting to the meat of this. And what I'm going to do, try to make it more efficient, is pull in some of the questions. So both Nadir Godrej and Karthik Shenoy had a question on the financial services business, but I'm going to wrap it into a broader question, Sanjiv. Some of it might be repetitive, so just hear me closely. When I look at what you, Nanu Uncle, and Rajiv Jain have achieved, I see, maybe there are many more. I see three areas that you really focused on. One was your entire digital strategy and digital augmentation. You adopted something like the digital thing very, very, very early. I mean, I, being an ex-consultant myself and seeing a lot of companies recently, know many companies who talk about a digital officer or a chief digital officer, but frankly, beneath it there's nothing. I mean, it's connecting to the internet is digital. So tell us what this overly abused word digital, what made you adopt the whole digital way of life way ahead of it? What does being digital mean to you at Bajaj Finance? Now, so there are three things. One is digital. Second is talent acquisition. You touched a bit on this, but be a little bit more specific on what do you do differently? I mean, your way of attracting a Rajiv Jain, or we were fortunate enough recently to meet 7 of your CEOs. And when I discussed it with my team at Kedaara, who were all there, we hadn't seen a better set of managers around the world. Just to put it in context, Pune is not the easiest place. You think of Bombay or Delhi or maybe Bangalore. So attracting that talent and keeping it, what is the magic sauce that you've done that? The second. And third was, I don't know how to put this except to say there's some sort of a weird risk reward culture where, I see, for example, the guy who had your housing finance company, your Bajaj Health Direct, Bajaj Markets, each of them feels like a mini CEO. They feel like owners, right? And there's a broader question there on, you and I have often talked about professional management versus family-owned, family members in the business or owners in the business. Yours is one unique institution, which I haven't seen another one truly in the country, where each of your CEOs feels like family or feels like owners. So on these three parameters, and maybe I've missed out a bunch of others, digital augmentation and digital strategy, talent acquisition and risk reward culture, say a few words in this, because I truly feel that there is something very different or distinctive, and I can't put my hands around it, but I'd love for you to say it in your words and how it applies to Finserv and Bajaj Finance.
So 2008, we decided that we will expand in the consumer durable financing business, because we used to do a little bit of that in addition to financing our own motorcycles and three-wheelers. And we were doing about 10 to 12,000 loans a month at that time. Devang Modi, who now heads our Finserv Health venture, got hired from GE to build that business up. And a few months down the line, Nanu told him that unless you scale this business, I have no time for hobbies. I will shut it down in the next 6 months. We realized we had no money to scale the business. We couldn't go on a large capex spree. The cloud had just started emerging, and in Salesforce.com, we found this company that had a CRM product on the cloud. And in discussions with them, they agreed, along with our own expertise, to repurpose their CRM to do loan origination on the cloud. We were working through a few thousand stores, doing consumer durables. We started rapidly expanding that. We also realized that if we had to give multiple loans to the same customer, we needed to understand his risk on an ongoing basis. Whereas, a loan is something that you take only once in a while. So by then, CIBIL, our first credit bureau, had about 40 million customers, and we used to get a 40-50% hit, positive hit on CIBIL. That means they were on CIBIL when they applied for our loan. So we said, let's start focusing on data early on, both to keep tabs on the customer so that we have a better assessment of who the customer is, and build a risk profile on the customer. So we first went to CIBIL, we then went to multiple agencies. We started creating our own credit record of the customers. So each customer has a unique credit assessment today with us of our 60 million customers in Bajaj Finance. We started using data from his existing loans to understand his or her behavior, and gradually ended up getting more and more digital, because that is how we understood better customer risk to be able to cross-sell to the customer. And the cloud helped us variabilize our costs more and more. So we extended then the cloud to our dealers. We extended it to the large manufacturers with whom we had tie-ups like your Samsungs and Sonys of the world. And we run a very robust 5-year rolling strategy plan mid-year every year. That plan is really about dreaming and then finding the ways to achieve that dream. And thereafter, we go into a 4-week period where we do a very strong and rigorous org review to be able to support that plan going forward. Of course, the plan then develops into projects, and many of them do become successful business initiatives, and only then they get manned. But we go through the entire planning process. And then by February, by and large, the first year of the plan in a lot more rigorous manner becomes our budget for the next year. Very detailed budgets, bottom up, created bottom up, with the business heads taking ownership. So there is a very high level of involvement, ownership, strategy development. A lot of it is not only guidance from the top, but it is bottom-up aspirations of people who are thinking and behaving like entrepreneurs in a structured institutional format that we have just learned by ourselves to create. We could not afford McKinsey in those days, so we just had to build it out ourselves. And we learn as we move ahead. None of this is rocket science, but it is about doing what works for you and building that through. We also very early on, our high performers, every 18 to 24 months, we change their roles. We move them from business to functional roles. We had business guys getting into HR. We had our accountant who enjoyed technology, getting into technology, and now is the CTO for the company and has taken on the additional role of strategy head for the company. So we believe that if you have the right attitude, the right capability, you're willing to work hard with others, then other than certain technical roles, somebody's a data scientist, somebody may be a high-end analyst, other than that, you can do any role in the company. So we've encouraged people to do that. And today, all our leaders have come in from our own businesses. For example, a general insurance company, Tapan Singhal, has been CEO for the last 10 years. Tapan came from the public sector, started off as a branch manager in Bajaj Allianz General, moved his way up to become state head, then became marketing head, and eventually in 2011 became managing director and CEO of the company. And I think that's a great story for other people to see in the company as well, and outside, to know that you can do this. And that's where comes that balance between risk and reward. We, across our companies, whether it's our insurance companies or Bajaj Finance, we say we are risk first. But as I mentioned earlier, the more information you have about the person you're giving money to or you're doing an insurance with, the lesser is risk, because you understand the person better. So that's a continuous exercise of ours. And our teams get rewarded to take long-term bets. We have failed a few times. Our teams get rewarded to take measurable risk, because if you don't accept failure, you're playing too safe. You're never going to push the boundaries of what's mediocre to become extraordinary, unless teams know that as long as they don't make stupid mistakes and don't make the same mistake twice, you will fail at times. We are growing fast enough where we can absorb that. So people do that. Our compensation structure, whether our annual bonuses or long-term incentive plans or ESOPs where we can give them, are heavily skewed towards variable pay. So again, people are incentivized to think long-term. They get rewarded long-term as well. And that's where it brings in, I think, the balance between family and professional management. When I, as a line manager, ran exports at Bajaj Auto, my job was that of a professional. It was not of a family member. I worked as a professional. When I got evaluated as a professional, when I moved to Finserv and my role changed to building with my team these companies, it was no longer a line role in any one company. And that's where we build the right metrics, where not only our CEOs, but our senior leaders have this foundation and environment that we have built where they can act as entrepreneurs, they can build their businesses. We focus on building the right strategy, building alignment, getting the best people we can. I remember even in 2008-9, between Rajiv, Jain, Nanu and I, we had decided that we had whatever 20-25 crore profit at that year, that whoever we hired, we would try to hire the best that we could pay for at that point of time. And the last, I would say 7-8 years at least, we would be among the best paying in the industry, not just amongst NBFCs, but amongst banks as well. But that is skewed towards entrepreneurism, that is skewed towards long-term performance, ownership. And by doing that, I believe that we bring that right balance between family, or I would say the board, actually. Many of our companies are listed companies that gets involved with strategy, governance, identifying talent and grooming them, and the management, which gets involved not only in co-building strategy with us, but in running these businesses as if they're their own.
Thanks, Sanjiv. Very, very comprehensive. I'm going to go on to one or two other questions which are related to some of the questions that we had for you in any case. I'll take one from Anand Piramal, who asked the question on, and I'm smiling because you and I have discussed this often, BNPL. Does it have any substance or is it a flash in the pants? I always thought it was just EMI in different words, but would love to hear your answer. And connected to that, you know, this whole question on being an NBFC versus being a bank, as NBFCs grow past a certain size, it's seeming like at least on the liability side of the balance sheet, in order to bulk that up, you really need to become a bank. Where do you stand on this issue? It's I'm sure you've addressed this in many IR calls. So two questions, BNPL specifically, substance or just a fad, and then going on into the banking license and becoming a bank. How do you manage growth? The growth that you're having at 30-40% a year, we'll get to the asset side later, but on the liability side, you don't have CASA. All the banks have CASA. How in the hell are you going to compete with them? If someone switches off a certain tap with some of the wholesale banks, you don't want to be stymied. So just your thoughts on both those.
Sure. Of course, different people will have different views on BNPL. We saw the rise of that not only in India, first in Australia, other parts of the world, including Europe, UK, the US, and we have seen the fall as well. Essentially, any loan is BNPL. You're buying now, you're paying a little down payment, very often just 5% or 0%, and the rest of it you're paying later. What we do with 100,000 loans a day, loans of average ticket size 20-25,000 rupees are all loans which are 8 to 18-month loans. That is nothing but BNPL. I think the BNPL industry just got caught into a very short end of that, very short value loans, 3-4 months, so basically just helping people through the pandemic stretch their dollar, and instead of paying everything up front, paying it over 3 or 4 months, but naturally at most of the cases, no interest. There was very little credit evaluation done of that customer. And keep in mind that a customer that needs for even a 10-15,000 rupee product loan 3 or 4 months to pay is not necessarily going to be the right credit customer for you to make money on, and you don't make money on the first customer. All these BNPL players lose money on the first customer and or on the first product that you're selling to that customer. And inherently, because you get very little time period to assess risk in 3 months, 4 months, you hardly get an experience of the customer's ability to pay you on a regular basis. Selling them that multiple products only means you lose more money. Hence, you need a certain minimum ticket size and you need enough customer experience. Now, there could be different ways to getting there. BNPL could evolve into something different. I think payments has been a great invention in India, digital payments, first through the wallet, then through UPI. The opportunity through payments is really to build good customer risk scorecards, but eventually payments by itself doesn't make money. All payments players lose money and they will continue to lose money because this is just plain plumbing. You make money if you can manufacture and sell financial products to those payments customers. And that's what many of them are trying to do now. So that's my own view on BNPL. As far as bank and liability is concerned, it is something that we've been over the last 7 or 8 years been evaluating. So every 3 years, we do a very serious evaluation of what the next 3 years looks for us on the asset side, on the liability side, whether we think we can raise enough money through the NBFC structure. And when we were 15,000 crores in assets, we used to say that, once you get to 25, 30,000 crores, corporate debt market, bank lines will start drying out. Fortunately, India has kept growing. We got to 25,000, we felt 50,000 was the limit. When we got to 50,000, we said 1 lakh crore and we'll have to change. Today, we are at 2,20,000 crore. And we feel that the highway is still very much open. Plus, because we were an old NBFC, we have a deposit license. Today, as you know, CASA, if you're over 30-35% CASA, that's a good number to have. If you get much over 45, 50, it starts getting too expensive. We are today close to 25% with our fixed deposits on the liability side. And our aim is over the next 5 years to take it to 30-35%. So we think the liability side is reasonably well covered. There are many pros and cons of a bank versus an NBFC. And NBFC gives you a lot more flexibility. Though I must say, we have never used any regulatory arbitrage between lighter rules for NBFCs when we've built our business. We've always gone by the most sensible rules and followed banking guidelines even before we were required to, and very often even tighter guidelines than what banks are required to. But the overall supervisory regime of RBI is lighter for an NBFC. Having said that, it is getting tighter and tighter. The second is that very often NBFCs are an equivalent of a learner's license, and the final license is of a bank. This was what was a common way to think about it till a few years ago. So it was natural that an NBFC would at some point move to a bank if RBI allows you to. As we know, the current rules of RBI don't allow industrial houses to be banks, while they have equally admitted in the last 20 years that their experience giving to individuals have also resulted in multiple failures, requiring them to merge those banks into other better established banks. The most important issue is, like we are seeing this digital world disintermediate and disintegrate multiple different sectors. We can see what's happened with the retail. We can see what's happened with hotel and travel, hospitality. It has already started disintermediating financial services on the asset side. Till 10 years ago, if you had a bank account with a particular bank, you went mostly to that same bank, whether you wanted a car loan, a personal loan, a home loan, or a credit card. Today, you shop for each of those. You may have your primary bank account with Bank X, but if you want a housing loan, there are 10 other banks and NBFCs that come after you. There are apps which will consolidate and give you offers on multiple credit cards. So when you think of banking as a structure hasn't changed for the last 200 years. Typically, you spend some money to get a customer to open a bank account and deposit his money with you. And then you charge that customer a little bit for a whole set of products and services that you give them. That's all that banking is. You pay a little bit of interest on the deposit he leaves with you, and you charge a little bit more interest to the person you give a loan to. Now what's happening is, with the asset side of banking getting disintermediated, those revenue streams are disappearing for traditional banks. And I believe more and more of this disintermediation will happen because a lot of it is just based by regulation. And that means that's a signature by the pen of somebody in the regulator. At the same time, we know that it's a very sensitive sector as well. So it doesn't mean things will open up overnight. And hence that answer is not a very obvious answer, whether a bank or the flexibility of an NBFC, but done right. So it's something we keep evaluating every few years. At this stage, we believe as an NBFC, we are doing well. We have the rigor, we have the discipline, we have the conservatism, and that is holding us in good stead.
Great. So this could be Bajaj Bank. We'll ask the same question to the RBI governor when we get him on the talk show next, Sanjiv. But let me, on our end to coming to the end of this, let me just try to balance the liability side on the asset side. On the asset side, Sanjiv, you've grown at a ridiculous rate, right? And what had your fear been on the tail risk of the loan portfolio? Having your level of NPAs at this level of size and growth just seems, if I was looking at any other company, I would say there's fraud, that these numbers aren't real. It can't be real. How can you sustain this level of growth? Is this a G capital where you're hiding something and having this sort of a consistent growth rate? How do you manage the tail risk on your loan portfolio? And if I can just use, there was another question from someone, what would the size of Bajaj look like 10 years from now? Talk about it from an AUM perspective, from a market cap perspective, or a profitability. You were 21 crores, you're now at 5,000 crores. If you were to predict, and I'll hold you to it 10 years out, what would that number look like from a AUM, net profit? And let's complicate this a bit further and say from market cap. You were, in your words, so 250 or 300 crores when you took over. You were very happy at 10,000 crores. You said you lost track after that. I'll remind you, it's about 450,000 crores right now. That's about the same or slightly higher than Kotak and slightly lower than HDFC. If you were to look out 10 years later or you choose 5 or 10 years later on AUM, net profitability or market cap, what would the aspiration be and what would the plan lead you to?
So the last part of your question is actually easy. Firstly, it's very difficult to look out 10 years. So we don't even have numbers for 10 years. But I do believe that the next 10 years for India, and a little bit with my CI hat on, are going to be the best years that we have. Only we can mess it up. So there's tremendous promise. The world is looking for an alternate sourcing base. Our per capita GDP has crossed $2,500, where beyond this incremental money all goes into savings, very often financial savings. So I believe the future is really bright. We do have numbers out for the next 5 years, but I'm not going to share that over here with the broader audience. We're a publicly listed company. But I think the important thing is that being a risk-first company, being in and I'm talking Bajaj Finance, being in 37 different business lines, we actually, for the last 5 years, every quarter publish a rolling, I think, 8-quarter loss chart or graph for each of these business lines. That's in our investor deck. We've always been very candid, very open, of course, without giving too much competitive data, but in sharing enough information with the street, because we see that the street is valuing us richly, and we think we owe it to them so that they have no surprises, at least nasty surprises. Our growth that you see is not a growth number that we aspire for top down, but it's more a bottom up number. And that's why you don't see business lines which have slowed down growth in particular years, where we saw risk higher and where we shut down a bunch of cities or states. And then we have a rigorous process to reevaluate and open them as well. Because what you see is a combination of 37 business lines and geographies. We are now in 4,000 cities and towns around the country. So you see an amalgamation of that. But every business line has its own P&L, has its own risk metrics. It has to meet certain return on its assets. If it has to grow, it has to be supported by the right talent and the right org structure. If that org structure is not filled up adequately, they can't grow their business. So there are a set of metrics there. We went through a slowdown in the initial part of the pandemic. We went and provided very conservatively, so much so that we wrote back a lot of it. So we are conscious that at heart, we have to be conservative. And a combination of these things, and I know we're running out of time, so there's actually a lot more level in the detail, but it's end of the day, 37 guys and the CEOs on top acting as though this is their money and behaving and building the business or slowing the business down accordingly.
Sanjiv, terrific. I have one final question, which was given by someone, and I'm tempted only because I had a similar question, and then I'm going to pass it out to Nupur because there's a guy called Rudy Gopalakrishnan who's asking these mischievous questions, which is inappropriate for me to ask. So I'll let Nupur ask it. But before that, the last serious question that I have for you is, You just mentioned about, the valuation, you're trading at a crazy price to book. Just as a private equity guide, I know many other bankers will probably show you 100 ideas. You have a fantastic currency for acquisitions. When you're almost anything you acquire will be accretive from a simplistic point of view. You have not shown that aspect of aggressiveness when there are many opportunities. Maybe it was even your neighbor in Pune who just sold a housing company to TPG, one more of these ugly PE firms. But in your mind, what has stopped you from being more acquisitive? Any thinking or philosophy behind that? And that's a question somebody had on the list.
So, we decided this many years ago that if we have to acquire a business, it would not be for growth for 2 to 3 years because we are growing well enough on our own. Secondly, irrespective of our own price, we would buy at a value that made sense, but the business must be complementary to what we are doing. And lastly, the team must have similar culture. We have seen most acquisitions get very complicated. They take away a lot of time and focus from your core business. So it's not that we've not looked at acquisitions. Instead, what we've started doing in the last couple of years, we made an announcement just a few weeks ago, is that we realize that this world is getting so digital and we don't have all the digital capabilities ourselves. So we are actually spending money acquiring or taking significant stakes in technology companies that are working in our industry, working with us to bring in greater alignment, responsibility, and mind share. We are finding that to make a lot more sense. But if we find a good complementary business, who knows, maybe not in India. It is something that we are open to if it meets the various requirements. At the same time, organically, we've been growing well. So that's not been a problem. I saw a question from Anand Piramal that popped up saying, who's going to win the long-term war? Is it going to be current traditional companies, fintechs, or platforms? Platforms bring a large number of customers on board. There's no doubt about that. But are those customers credit tested? Are those customers full KYC? Do you understand their ability to bear financial risk? I think one will need a lot more understanding around that. What is a fintech? And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but to me, a fintech has to have the heart of a traditional finance with the mind of tech. And you don't have to look too far if you want to look at who's the true fintech.
But Sanjiv, I've been very well behaved this whole time. I can't, given what I just saw on the chat, I can't help ask this question. I don't know if Anand can be put on or not, but he asked this question on who will win the future. If you were to see, this is only partly a joke and partly serious, how would you, Sanjiv, compete against the Piramal Geo fintech platform, which is about to be launched?
So as you said, it's a serious, maybe a humorous question in the short term. It's a serious question in the medium to long term. As I mentioned, we need multiple financial services businesses, good quality in India. It is people who can gather the right information on their customers, credit test them, offer them products that they need in a transparent manner that will end up succeeding. And a number of these companies, I think, have tremendous opportunity, but you can't jump too ahead of the game. There is no consultant model. There is no single software that you can go and spend billions of dollars to go and set up to make up for time. The only way to do this business successfully is to learn from failures, learn from giving to right and wrong customers, and keep building your credit models. You can't steal somebody else's credit model. You can't go and hire 10 people and build out that model, because they can build the theoretical model, but they don't build the knowledge, which is the data, the customer data that sits behind that. So I believe there is tremendous opportunity. There we can see Anand. Hey, Anand, you lost a lot of weight. At the end of it, I would say that after all this is Bajaj Finance, we have 1.6% of the banking system. We have a long way to go. So they have a lot of opportunity as well.
Anand has lost weight because he's preparing for the upcoming battle. Anand, do you have any final few quick words?
I'll just say, well, it's Geo, not Piramal Geo. I'm waiting for my role model, Manish Kejriwal, to join his in-laws business. Then I can think of such questions to pull your leg a little, Manish. Thank you. But Sanjeev, it's an incredibly inspiring story, and you're really, both gentlemen on the panel are great role models for all of us. So I hope we can create a business of such scale, quality, and credibility that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. And final thing to this, I would say, Manish, is wake up every day thinking it's day one.
Thanks. Sanjeev, listen, all I'll say is I can't think of a more fun interaction, at least that I've had, where I've behaved myself for most of the time. I apologize for all the questions we couldn't get to, but please send them to Nupur. I'm sure she'll forward it to Sanjeev. And I just want to end sincerely by saying one thing. My last question was an attempt to bring out some mischievous response, but all I can say is Sanjeev has learned very well from his father. He's got all the smarts, he's got all the retorts, and I know there would be a funny retort which will come to Anand and me afterwards, but he's also got the diplomacy of his mother, which prevented him from answering what I was hoping he would answer to that naughty question that Anand instigated. I didn't think about it myself. So thank you, Sanjeev, for being such a perfect son, a perfect role model, a great brother and sister, a family member. And I think everyone's learned a lot from you in this. So Nupur, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish. What an absolute delight. I hope everyone can see me and everyone can hear me. It was such an incredible discussion, and in the spirit of that same naughtiness, and Manish, I will share the question that Manish alluded to earlier. It was an interesting question that I think is worth just at least keeping in the spirit and style of Manish's moderation. Let's share. A question that came through was, growing up, Hamara Bajaj was a euphemism for a young, ambitious India. Rajiv grabbed auto, Sanjeev grasped finance, and Manish seized Sunena. Manish clearly did the best given the sheer audacity of his ambition and his relentless desire to get what he wanted. Would you agree? Or is it worth commenting on? Is there something that you'd like to share? Simply commend Manish on his impeccable judgment, having built a relationship into the Bajaj family through Sunena. So that was the question that Manish was thrown his way from Gopal Krishna. So I would share that. Sanjeev, would you like to respond?
So my sister may be on this call as well, and she's only a year younger than me. So I have to fully agree with Manish. He got the best of the three. The only thought I want to leave Manish with is that Rajiv can choose to do something different than Bajaj Auto. Sanjeev can choose to do something different than Bajaj Finserv. Manish?
Thanks. That was not my question, Nupur. Just to be clear, that was from a naughty guy called Rudy Gopal Krishnan, which all of you, many of you might know. So we make sure we get him online and give me a chance to interview him. He's achieved a lot also, and give him back what he deserves. But thanks so much, Nupur.
Absolutely. And thank you to both of you. Sanjeev, we could not have asked for a better way to wrap up 2022. This was a masterclass, as many have described, and the fact that we have so many participants willing to stay on in the evening with you to continue this conversation, I think is just a huge testament to not only your leadership, the journey that you have carved for yourself, but that of Bajaj as well. There was so many things that stood out for me that's hard to capture, but your relationship with your family, especially your father, your relationship with your school, whether in your early childhood days or that of HBS, which seem to have had a tremendous influence on your own leadership style, your conditioning of the mind, as you rightfully pointed out, your relationship with your customer base, the fact that you described it as a Mercedes-Benz, not a Ferrari, not a Ford. I thought that was such a beautiful way to describe that. And of course, your relationship with your team, which we spent time discussing, and the way that you built this organization, which has just been inspirational and impressive, because you have obviously built an institution that's defined by and owner mindset, which I think is something that many of us are still aspiring to mimic in many ways. So thank you for sharing us a behind the scenes look into all of these different aspects. You were generous with your insights, with your candor, and we could not have asked for a better time this evening to spend with you. So thank you once again for being so generous with your time.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed speaking as well, and to all the participants over there, thank you, and for the questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sanjiv. And Manish, as expected, you were a brilliant moderator. You are such a vibrant individual that brings to life these stories and makes them just so magical, these experiences. Thank you for effortlessly weaving so many different pastures. I know there were a ton of questions being thrown your way from our engaging audience. Clearly, 60 minutes was not enough for such a masterclass. There was so much ground to cover, but you really did bring to life Sanjiv's journey and the justice. There's so many different aspects of that conversation. To all our alums and members that joined us today, thank you for being here. Thank you for your active participation. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and will generously share your feedback on the alumni groups, on other social media handles. But Manish, once again, thank you on behalf of the alumni community for taking out the time and effort to carve this story together.
Thanks, Napar.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
And Manish, you
Go
have
ahead,
good
Sunil.
availability for future moderations.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Till we meet again, stay well, stay safe. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.